Today's devotion is from 2 Thessalonians chapter 3, verses 7 through 15. I've titled this The Warning Against Idleness. Let me read the first couple of verses. For you yourselves know how you ought to imitate us, because we were not idle when we were with you, nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it. But with toil and labor we worked night and day, that we might not be a burden to any of you. Now, what pastors Paul, Silvanus, and Timothy are saying here is, we showed you and we told you, and so we feel justified in admonishing those of you who are not following our example and instructions. Now, the word that's translated as idle can also be translated as disorderly, and that would refer to soldiers out of rank. So this is kind of serious. Now, also, the pastors work to not be a burden on the church, and also by that example, they were declaring that the gospel is free of charge. We know that as God's grace. It's not something that we earn. Let me read the next couple of verses 9, 10, and 11. It was not because we do not have that right, but to give you in ourselves an example to imitate. For even when we were with you, we would give you this command. If anyone is not willing to work, let him not eat. For we hear that some among you walk in idleness, not busy at work, but busybodies. Now this command, if you're not willing to work, you don't eat, it's not something they made up. It's actually God's declaration of the consequences of sin. Way back in Genesis chapter 3, verse 19, he said, by the sweat of your face you shall eat bread, till you return to the ground. For out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Now there are some blessings for labor and obedience, and we find that in Psalm 128, verses 1 of 2. It says, blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. You shall eat the fruit of the labor of your hands. You shall be blessed, and it will be well with you. However, idleness, that results or gives rise to a restless spirit, which then becomes subject to uncontrolled thoughts and desires. And some of these manifest themselves as gossiping, meddling, mischief-making, talking about the latest sensational rumor, and in short, disturbing the peace. Now, this would happen early in the church's life. I mean, this church is only about 3 years old, but it continues even down to today. Perhaps you've heard the phrase, idle hands are the devil's playground. So from that, we can say that Christianity and idleness do not agree. Verse 12. Now such persons we command and encourage in the Lord Jesus Christ to do their work quietly and to earn their own living. He's talking about the idlers. Now in the next verse, he's talking about the non-offenders. As for you, brothers and sisters, do not grow weary in doing good. Now, here is something that you probably have experienced. If you are involved in charity work, you will most likely encounter all kinds of evil behavior, dishonesty. Some of the others are slothfulness, ungrateful to the kindnesses being showed. And if you're not careful, you will grow weary and your heart may become hardened. And that could be a worse evil, because then the innocent, the truly needy, those who are unable to work, will suffer. So if you find this happening to yourself, remember that Jesus Christ suffered a lot of ingratitude at the hands of sinners, and he had a lot of patience. So we are to be Christ-like. None of us are going to hit that mark, but we can strive towards it. So beware that you could grow weary, and if you are, you need to check that. Now, verse 14 and 15. If anyone does not obey what we say in this letter, take note of that person and have nothing to do with them. Let me change the page here just a second. That he may be ashamed. Do not regard him as an enemy, but warn him as a brother. Now, the pastors anticipate that this admonishment of theirs is going to be disregarded by some of the offenders. And because of that, the church must now deal with it, and they must deal with it publicly. However, these verses have been misused over the years, and there's nothing here that says excommunication. The problem is there's a disease, and the pastors are telling the non-offenders, you need to cure that disease. Don't do an amputation. That would be an excommunication. And also warning them as a brother. All of us are subject to kind of going too far in our discipline. And so this is a check against our severity and causing hostility and ending up with a person who's alienated entirely from the love of Christ. So I've got a couple of challenges for us taken from these verses. And I'm going to put them as a form of questions. Am I growing weary in doing good works? If so, is it because I'm doing them in my own wisdom, using my own strength, my own resources, and my own experience? Or am I praying without ceasing for God's wisdom, God's strength, God's resources to do His will? I hope these daily devotions have been challenging for you as well as encouraging for you. And thanks for joining us today.